And after my internship at LinkedIn, I actually did not get an offer to return to become a full-time software engineer. And when I was actually talking to the LinkedIn recruiter, I kind of knew that you would have to be, the top 50%, not 5%, to get a return offer. So I was basically in the bottom 50%. So during my internship at Google, I actually worked really, really hard. I was basically like the only one to actually show up to the office at every single weekend during my internship at Google.
The next Tech Track interview is with Howard Rowe, a friend of mine who I met during our time together at Stanford. Howard is a Google veteran, having worked on the Android team at Google for more than 5 years now. He's currently a TLM, or Tech Lead Manager, working on Android metrics. In our conversation, we talk about Howard's experience at Stanford as an international student coming from Korea, his experience getting into the tech industry, and how he thinks about job switching. I hope you enjoy our conversation, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe so you know when other videos come out. So you ended up actually doing multiple high-powered internships. You did Uyala, then you did LinkedIn, and you actually interned at Google. And now we're approaching kind of the end of your Stanford career because you actually spent some extra time at Stanford to do a master's degree, similar to what I did. So how are you thinking about the landscape now? So you just finished your internship at Google. How did you think about either returning to Google, applying for another company, or any other option you considered?
Right. So at the end of my Google internship, I kind of knew that I was going to be able to get a return offer. And to be honest with you, the internship before Google, I interned at LinkedIn, and that's when after my internship at LinkedIn, I actually did not get an offer to return to become a full-time software engineer. And when I was actually talking to the LinkedIn recruiter, I kind of knew that you would have to be the top 50%, not 5%, to get a return offer. So I was basically in the bottom 50%. So during my internship at Google, I actually worked really, really hard. I was basically like the only one to actually show up to the office at every single weekend during my internship at Google. And I knew that I didn't have to do that, but I was very paranoid and desperate to actually get a return offer to Google. Because the year before, I actually did not actually get any return offer from the company that I worked for, which is LinkedIn. So I actually, worked really hard to get a return offer at Google. But even then, I thought that I should actually, search for additional opportunities beyond Google because, companies that I work for, it's basically Uyala, LinkedIn, Google in terms of my, careers, companies that I work for during when I was, studying. They are, different sizes those are the companies in different sizes. Uyala was in the order of 200. LinkedIn back then was in the order of thousands. Google was in the order of like dozens of thousands. But I didn't know what other options are out there. So I was also interested in like finding out like other industries like fintech. So I was interviewing with other companies like Coinbase and Wealthfront. Like these are the like other types of companies that I was also interested in finding out. And at the same time, I also wanted to see like what it feels like to work in other cities. So I was also kind of interviewing for Microsoft in Seattle and kind of see what it feels like to be there. But another reason behind that, to be honest with you, is being able to kind of talk with other friends who's already in the industry. Kind of they were sharing all this information that if you actually have multiple offers, then sometimes these companies would actually increase your salary because you can actually kind of leverage your negotiation power by having different offers. So that's another reason I wanted to interview with different companies. And that itself was a really pleasant experience because you get to meet all these awesome people. And the fact that you actually get to meet with people and going through this coding interview sometimes is pretty intellectually challenging and it's interesting. So that's I think I actually spent about 3 months even after getting a Google offer on being able to see what other opportunities are out there for me.
Yeah, and the keyword you said there, I think, is leverage, right? When you are applying for a job, the only real leverage you have are other jobs that you already have offers at. And so if you want to increase compensation, my experience has been similar to yours, is that the only way really you can increase your compensation is if you have leverage by being able to point to another offer or multiple offers that you have. And that can actually lead to a pretty non-trivial increase in your total compensation. So it sounds like that actually worked out really well for you.
Well, I don't know whether it really worked out well or not because I don't know any other people, but it was basically when I was signing for Google, it was definitely higher than when I first got an offer from Google. So
Got it.
that's, to me, it's basically a free money because, you're actually getting paid more than what Google had initially offered you. So,
Right.
and I actually see many of my, fellow Stanford friends or other friends of mine who just who are very stressed with the going through the recruiting process, so that as soon as they see any offer, I've seen cases where where people would just sign right away without having to look for other opportunities. I mean, that's not wrong, and it's everyone has different opinions, but if you have more kind of time or effort that you can spare on, I would actually recommend just talking to different companies. And it's not just about money. The fact that you actually kind of get to know what this company is working
Yeah.
for, the
Totally.
fact that there's there's like this opportunity out there, it's just a really precious opportunity, and things that you will actually kind of the more that the more power you have in your career. So I would definitely recommend talking to many different companies, and not just for the money but for other reasons.
Yeah, 100% agree. And in fact, I remember when we were at Stanford together, and I think even now, Stanford had a rule where if you got an offer from a company, they had a minimum time that they had to give you before they compelled you to either accept or reject. Because a lot of companies had this really bad policy where they would give you an offer and say, okay, you have 24 hours. Let us know in 24 hours whether you accept or reject. And so Stanford made it an actual rule that if you give any of our students offers, you need to give them, I think the minimum, I forget exactly, it was like 2 or 3 weeks. And I think it goes back to what you're saying, which is that having that 2 or 3 week period minimum is essential to collect information, and information is power. You can make a much better decision once you have all the information.
Nowadays, I mean, there's more information online too, so people should look for like what the resources and for look for more up like information on this. But I would definitely kind of, before talking to recruiters, or like as you're progressing towards the interview process, what I would definitely do is understand like what's going to be what the next steps are going to look like, and be prepared for that. If the recruiter is going to give you an offer, clarify with the recruiter on like how long this candidate will have before he or she needs to sign the offer.
Yeah.
These are the things that you should do, and then like align the interview processes among different companies when you're going through the process, so you can actually have different offers at the same time. Because otherwise, if you have one offer and then you're just still interviewing with another company, that may not help. So these are the things that you should do definitely by talking with other friends or just looking up online. There are a lot of good resources like Blind, and I know that there are like negotiation as a service is still is a thing these days. I was very
Yeah.
surprised to find those services. So these are the things that people, I think, should look for.
Yeah, I love that. That's great advice. Okay, so now you're at Google. You're a full-time employee at Google. And let's fast forward a little bit. You've actually now been at Google for more than 5 years. So
Mhm.
I have two questions. One question is, what have you been doing at Google for all that time? And second, what has kept you at Google for so long? Given that the average tenure of people staying in a company in Silicon Valley is about 2 years, so you're way beyond kind of the average length. So yeah, what have you been doing at Google, and how long? Like, why do you stay at Google even now?
Okay, the first thing, what I've been doing at Google, I've been working on this team called Android Telemetry. So this is the team that provides like a telemetry to Android and other app developers out there. So like a typical example of the things that my team does is, we collect statistics around like how an app is performing. So as an app developer, it is your motivation to provide like a healthy app that does not degrade like a user experience. So
Mm-hmm.
you like the typical things that we actually collect are things like whether there's an app that is crashing, whether there's an app that is draining your battery a lot, because phones are something that is in your pocket or in your hand, and it's really important for you to actually have a very reliable kind of experience with those devices. Otherwise, in the very emergency scenario, if your phone is dead and you're not able to call 911, well, that's not good. So like things are very important for you to actually kind of, it's really important for your phone to be reliable, and it's for it to work. And it's not just scoped for like an app and then for the device wide. Like it's those are the things that my team is very responsible for. So that's what I have been primarily working for within Google in the past 5.5 years.
And
And
just a quick
mhm,
follow up on that. So basically, it sounds like what you're saying is that you're basically providing telemetry or data about the performance of apps. So third party app developers, people like me, when I publish an app, I can get really valuable insights around what I need to fix in my app in order to have it rank more highly on Google Play. Is that right?
yes, as an app developer, what really happens is that once you build an app, you get an like Android APK that you
Yep.
will have to publish through an Play Store, and you would actually publish that, and then in the same console that you upload your APK is when you will also be able to understand overall system health statistics of your app performance, and it's an interest for an app developer to be able to build a healthy app, but it's also an interest for users to actually experience a good performing app. And that's also there's like a feedback loop where if your app is better performing, then you would actually get features in the Play Store, and deranked if you are not actually work if your app is not actually performing as compared to other similar apps out there. So it's
Yeah,
actually very well aligned.
that's amazing. Because I feel like we were talking earlier about how, there are millions of Android apps out there, and there are billions of people who use Android apps. And I think the thing that's amazing is the work that you're doing is actually impacting all of them, right? Like if I work on Twitter app and I make an improvement on Twitter, okay, that helps anyone who's using the Twitter app because they'll get like a better experience. But the work that you're doing and your team is doing is basically equipping all these app developers who make millions of apps to improve across the board. So I feel like it goes back to kind of that leverage word. You have such a huge impact across the whole ecosystem, which is pretty amazing.
I think that naturally kind of connects to your second question of like why more than 5 years at the same
Yeah.
company and at the same team. Yes, and large impact is definitely one of the reasons why I'm still in the same team and same company for this long. Basically, Android is now used more than from 2 billion people out there. And whenever I travel all around the world, like whenever I go visit my grandmother, whenever I go on a trip with my friends to Europe, like I would see people holding Android devices in their hands, and I can actually tell my grandmother that, okay, so that device
Yeah.
has a code that I wrote,
Yeah.
and there are more than 2 billion of them, and you don't really get to experience that number in terms of the multiplier by working in many different companies. Google and Facebook, there are only a handful of companies that are out there that you can actually enjoy such impact in the multipliers being in the billions. So those are one of the two primary reasons why I have been working for Google for this long. And another thing that I want to actually point out is the people. And Google has actually more than 100,000 employees by now, and it's been doing incredibly well in being able to maintain the quality of people at that scale. And basically, whenever I have a technical problem, I can always find a person who is arguably the number one, the person in that area or the field that I can actually solve that problem with.
Yeah.
So being able to kind of work with others and who are actually like excellent professional experts in the area is another motivation for me staying in Google for this long.
Yeah. And speaking of people, what you're doing day to day at Google, I'm sure has changed. 'Kay, when you started out, you were an IC or individual contributor, and now you're something called a TLM or a tech lead manager. So can you talk about what is a tech lead manager and why did you make that transition from IC into more of a people manager role?
Right. So, TLM, or otherwise known as technical lead manager, is basically a person in a team where you are responsible for shaping the direction, like technical direction for your projects,
Mm-hmm.
as well as managing a group of people. So I'm currently managing about like 5 or 6 people at Google, and I'm also kind of directing some of the technical decisions. So another type of role that is similar to this is just a TL, being a TL. So in that case, you would basically kind of set like a direction for some of the technical projects in your team, but you're not necessarily managing other people. But I happen to be doing both, and that transition kind of happened naturally because a lot of projects, my team was actually growing pretty fast, and we were basically working on more projects that we had to collaborate with other teams. And at the same time, there was some rework where like our existing managers had to kind of move on to like the larger roles. So I had to kind of assume this task of managing this specific projects, which then kind of got gradually adopted by many other teams within Google. So this actually transition happened naturally because a lot of tech companies have been growing exponentially in the past couple of years, and it just it was basically a very natural thing for me to transition to this manager track, because it basically needed more people, and it kind of needed more technical consultation as well as the people management to be able to kind of be successful at the projects that we were running in my organization.
Looking ahead a little bit, do you want to transition into kind of a full-time people manager role? Because right now you have a mix of both technical architecture work and coding, I imagine, along with the people side. What do you want to do going forward?
Before I answer my kind of future plans, I first want to point out that it's a very it's a really good opportunity for me to even be able to choose from these two different roles. I think in many of the other industries, they don't even actually get to choose whether you want to remain as an individual contributor versus people manager. So in like tech companies, you often get to choose between the two different roles. And if you are very into software engineering, you like coding, and in that case, you can actually remain as a software engineer, like as long as you can. But at the same time, for people who are more into working with others and collaborating and kind of shaping like what the project should be, but working with others to actually make that happen are the things that you can do alternatively. And for me, I think I kind of enjoy both, but I'm more leaning towards being able to work with others. Like I said earlier, coming from the military background, I kind of enjoy being able to talk with others and basically influencing others to achieve like more of a collective goal for the entire organization. Like are the things that I actually enjoy more than spending a couple hours coding and then making something actually work. I mean, that's something that I definitely enjoy, but I think I would actually optimize for something that would have more impact, in my opinion, and that is something that I can do better by actually working with others.
Yeah, and you make a really good point about how this idea of a dual track of either IC, individual contributor, or management track is actually something somewhat unique to Silicon Valley. And a lot of other industries, like you mentioned, the only path to increasing your career is going into management. So I'd love to understand your perspective on that, because you mentioned this word influence. And the way I think about promotion is that you have to keep having a larger sphere of influence. The higher level you are, the more influence you have. That's what it should be. That's what kind of promotion indicates. So
Correct.
Do you think that, like if you're an ambitious employee, do you think that that corporate structure kind of lends itself to you ending up in management track, even though they say that individual contributor and management are both equal options? Because in my head, it seems like it's harder and harder to have growing influence if you're only writing code. Whereas if you're managing a team, it's actually easier to kind of justify your promotion because you're now essentially getting the impact of your whole team. So I'm just wondering your thought on that.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would say that up to a certain level, remaining as an IC and making an impact through code and making something is definitely a really good path for those who enjoy coding. And it depends on what level you want to actually transition into people manager, or you can still remain as an IC for the rest of your career. But I think, different companies have a very different kind of policies around this. I think within Google, it's actually not just binary. I've seen many people who are actually remaining as a software engineer, who also basically work as a TLM, and basically doing a little bit of both. And there are people who would only manage people and never write a single line of code. I'm kind of in the hybrid model between the two. So I would basically not make this a binary thing, but it's more like a spectrum of two different ladder at the same time that can coexist. But in terms of what is more beneficial in terms of getting promoted or going up the ladder, I would say that in the end, if you look at our CEOs or CTOs, I don't think they write a code. I think they can make better use of their time by working with other people who can actually deliver things for them. So in my opinion, I think being able to delegate and kind of helping others succeed in order for me to succeed is something that I would actually kind of arguably say that that's a better fit for me in my case. But I have seen enough of the counterexamples for that too. I have seen many crazy smart engineers within Google who were able to make it up the ladder as remaining as an IC, who were able to kind of be promoted to be a directors and VPs within the company. So I would basically kind of make a call based on your kind of skill sets that you have. If you're very into kind of coding, I think you can stay as an IC or individual contributor up to a certain level, and then you can actually kind of question yourself whether you want to remain as an IC or transition into a manager ladder. But what I would recommend is stay as an IC for at least for the first 5 or more years, and then basically kind of experience and learn many different things. Because once you transition into manager, the technical spec that you can ramp up and learn additionally is going to be limited compared to the times when you are an individual contributor. Because in the end, even if you're a people manager, you would still need to understand how things work behind the scenes.
Yeah, and I think actually it connects back to what you were saying earlier, which is that the reason that the work that you're doing at Google is so amazing and that you feel proud of it is because you're actually influencing millions of apps, right? You're not actually, the work that you're doing with the telemetry on Android, you're not fixing individual apps. What you're doing is you're basically equipping app developers or equipping the Google Play platform to tell people, here's what you can do to actually improve the ecosystem, improve the app. So it sounds similar, right? As you go up the ladder, your job is to influence people and let them maybe do the work and equip them and unblock them to do the work. But oftentimes it's not you who is going to be writing the code. If you're a director or if you're the CEO of Google, you're typically not going to be writing any code, right? You're going to be influencing a lot of people who will do that for you.
Right. And I have always seen, even though I am currently a manager, some of my team members are, better at coding. And I think my job is to actually help them succeed by actually, writing a quality code. And I think, it's just, it is just more optimal for me and for them and for the company to be able to kind of be at the position where I can provide the most impact of. And that doesn't necessarily have to be in the form of, managing people or have to be in the writing code. It's just really dependent on what kind of skill set that you prefer to have.
If people do want the opportunity to connect with you, is there a platform on which I could point people to so they could kind of read more about you?
Right. So, definitely, I think, you can link my LinkedIn profile on your YouTube link. And, from there, once people actually reach out to me through LinkedIn message, I can then, connect them with them through my email.
I'll leave a link for your LinkedIn in the description of the video right below the like button. This is really fun. I appreciate you coming on. Thank you.